when you search for a particular keyword, they should find, Elasticsearch should find all the documents related to that keyword, and all kind of different stuff, right? Term frequency, inverse document frequency are used in maintaining inverted indexes, scoring function as well. So that's the full text search functionality. Apart from that, the really good thing about Elasticsearch is it provides REST APIs for everything. And by everything, I mean for managing the clusters, for indexing your data, and for searching. So that's a quick brief introduction to Elasticsearch. Let's look into Kibana as well in a similar manner. Then we'll jump into a quick demo. So Kibana is like a front end for Elasticsearch. You know, they usually go together. When you have Elasticsearch, you probably want to analyze your data, and that's where you use Kibana to, which provides a drag and drop interface of sort. It's written in TypeScript and React. They are slowly migrating to React, I would say. And as I mentioned, they provide drag and drop interface, which is really easy for developers as well as business people to kind of get used to. It is really intuitive. And these are the different things you can do with Kibana. So you can search the data that you have in Elasticsearch, you can observe it, you can visualize it, and you can analyze it. And to do so, it provides different functionalities like charts, maps, dashboards, even alerts. You know, if you find something unusual, you can actually set up alerts for them. So they'll ping you if your cost goes high or if you get too much load on your servers. All kind of cool stuff, right? And this is kind of a brief, we can say theoretical introduction to Elasticsearch and Kibana, but I would like to show you what it actually does. And we'll kind of do a quick demo of Kibana, and we'll talk about Elasticsearch as well while doing that. So I'll switch my screen and let me know if you guys can see a screen full of data. Is it visible?
Yes.
Okay. Right. So right off the bat, I want to start with a complicated thing in Kibana, which is called Discover. It just looks complicated. Actually, it's very, very simple. It is just showcasing the raw data that is stored in our Elasticsearch. So I have kind of ingested a demo data of web logs. So it's a log of requests and responses, right? You can see, you'll see a lot of URLs, a lot of headers, byte sizes and stuff. And this is just a raw representation of data. It's just key value pairs, right? So you have agent as a key and Mozilla as a value. So you can see it's just key value pair. And the good thing about Elasticsearch is it understands this data and it keeps maintaining indexes of this data automatically, right? If you provide it integers, it'll kind of deduce that, okay, these are integers, and I want to kind of have this kind of indexes for that, so that when somebody does a search or aggregation on that data, it's really, really fast. Similarly, you'll see it has geo-coordinates data built in as well. So you can store map related stuff as well. Apart from that, it supports IP addresses. So it recognizes different kinds of data, right? You can say it's one more layer of abstraction over databases. In databases, we kind of have to maintain indexes, right? Here, the indexes are also created by Elasticsearch itself. But of course, we as data engineers know the data best. So if we want to change stuff, Elasticsearch provides REST APIs for that. But this kind of gives you a brief overview of what data looks like in Elasticsearch. And on the left side, you can see all the columns that are available in Elasticsearch. And these 4 particular columns are auto-calculated by Elasticsearch. We usually don't worry about that. Okay, so this is a brief overview of what data looks like in Elasticsearch. Now let's look into the capabilities of Kibana, right? So as you can see, it has a whole arsenal of analytical tools available. We have we'll look into dashboards first. So let's go to dashboard. So here you can kind of store all the different dashboards that you can create. And what are dashboards? So they are just a collection of visualization you can see. Okay, so cool. These visualizations look good, right? They're complicated. They kind of showcase Kibana's true capabilities. But the good thing about these visualizations are they are interconnected. So and they are dynamic. So what I mean by that, for example, here you can see response codes over time, right? Response codes are just, responses to your request. So 200, 404, 503, right? And if I just want to see response codes over this area, I can just drag and drop, right? I can just drag and select that particular area, and all other dashboards will kind of update accordingly. And that's how all the dashboards are kind of dynamic. It also provides filtering functionality. So for example, here you can see that this kind of shows from which country the request is originate and where do they go, right? So this particular line shows that that 20 requests originated from Canada, and they reached they were pinging Indian servers, right? So I can filter from here as well. So I can say I want to see source country, which is India, and it will update all dashboards accordingly. So this one will now only show data for India, and every other dashboard that was visible has changed accordingly. I can clear all the filters, and you get the idea that you can create this kind of dynamic dashboards, which can obviously help analyze data that is stored in Elasticsearch. And this is just a map feature, which is like a good representation of geographical data, and you can see it's just storing all the requests and the size of those requests and putting a dot over maps for that. Right, and people like visualizations, but they also like seeing tables, good old tables as well, right? So here I have a simple table with requests and responses, and it also updates according to any filters I apply on the dashboard. One functionality that I would make note of is this particular 3 dot, which are available on all panels, right? They are called UI actions, and for different panels, there are different UI actions. For table, the interesting UI action for today's talk would be download CSV, which simply downloads CSV file for the given table. Okay, just keep that in mind. I'll give a reference to it as the talk goes on. Okay, so this is kind of a brief overview of different visualizations that are present in Kibana, and you can interact with them. You can filter over stuff. I just clicked on a pie and it updates everything accordingly. And creating this kind of stuff is also really easy. For example, let's go back to Discover. So here, let's say you are really interested in source countries where the requests originate from, right? So you can click on this particular column, and you will see a brief visualization of top countries with different requests. But you can also click on visualize, and it will take you to a new function called Lens, where you can create visualizations using drag and drop functionalities. So for example, currently I have selected source countries as my horizontal axis, right? And it is already suggesting various dashboards for that. So various dashboards that can be interesting, right? We have donut, we have stacked bar charts. We can also select anything else here as well. And if you want to break that data, for example, let's say I want a breakup of that data according to URL keywords. I can just drag and drop it. Right, so let me break down by URL keywords. And you can see it will kind of show you a breakdown of each number of requests with URL. So this way, with creating the visualization is really easy as well. And those are kind of all the capabilities of Kibana. Apart from that, they also have machine learning integration. So if you have data in your Elasticsearch, you want to train some models on them, you can dive into them. They have Canvas, which is like a presentation tool where you can kind of create slides and share them with everyone. And obviously, it has enterprise capabilities as well. So role management, authorization, stuff like that. OK, so that was kind of a brief look into Kibana. Let's remove these changes and go back to our dashboard. All right, so I'll go back to our presentation. Right, so that was Kibana and Elasticsearch. Now I want to talk about what we did with Kibana. Right, so we at Incubyte are using Elasticsearch and Kibana, and we kind of had some feature requests that Kibana didn't have, right? So some functionality that we wanted, but Kibana didn't have. And usually if you are using big tool like, let's say, Power BI or something like that, if the functionality is not present, you kind of have to give up on that tool. But Kibana is open source, right? And you can develop your own plugins for it to enhance its functionality. So let's talk a little bit about plugins, and then I want to kind of showcase how we ended up developing a plugin for Kibana and making it available as open source software. OK, so I will showcase Kibana's codebase in a limited scope today. But before we do that, let's kind of build an intuition of what plugins are, right? OK. Does anybody know what plugins are in the lobby? OK, I'll take that as a no. So you'll learn something new. So let's start, right? This is a simple system I ended up, or example I ended up designing to build an intuition for what plugins are. We'll just build a really extensible calculator, right? OK, I want to build a calculator, but I only know how to do addition, which is OK. I can kind of design an abstract system, and later I can write plugins for it and extend it, right? So I will probably be designing system which can incorporate or support various plugins, right? I'll provide the addition functionality. Maybe somebody else will, develop subtraction or multiplication or who knows what. For that, I have to kind of fulfill two different requirements. One is I'll have to provide interfaces for how the plugin should behave, right? This is especially true for languages which are strongly typed. I kind of want to tell people that, if you want to build a plugin for my system, you can build it. It's really easy. You just have to follow this interface, or you just have to abide by this contract. And another important thing is I'll have to provide a way for others to install external plugins to my system. OK, so stay with me. I'll showcase what I mean. So let's imagine the calculator as just a simple table, and the table has two columns, operator and functions, right? For example, if the user says plus, then he should be pointed to add function, right? OK, what would the system do? So system will have calculate function, which will take operator x and y, and it will kind of look up for what function to use from this table, right? So it will look up the operator. So if plus operator is provided here, it will kind of search in this particular column what is plus and what's the function related to that. And that function will be our calculation function, and it will just return the value of applying that calculation function over x and y. One more functionality our system provides is register functionality. So with register, you can just register your operator and your function to this plugin table, and the system will kind of understand that. Okay, let's kind of see this in action. So I told you that I know how to do addition. So I'll first make an addition plugin. For this small system, it is really simple, right? It's just an add function which takes x and y and returns x plus y. And I'll register this function. Now, just imagine that the programming language that we are using has first class functions, so we can pass functions to each other. So I'll say register plus operator with my add function, and it will register plus operator and add function, right? So this is my calculator. It only has addition functionality. I can ship it, right? And other people can use this calculator system for addition. Now there are lots of smart people, smart developers, and they will kind of develop plugins for that system. But before we go there, let's see how the system functions. So a user will just write plus 10 and 20. Internally, it will just call calculate plus 10, 20. Right, it will look up plus and it will find the addition function, and it will add 10 and 20 and it will return 30. Now somebody else decides that I want to build a subtraction function. They can do it, right? It's really easy. All they have to do is create a subtract function and register it with the minus operator. Somebody might decide to design a really inefficient multiplication algorithm, and they can register it with star operator, right? And you see this now this system is not just limited to addition subtraction, right? It is truly abstract and extensible. For example, somebody can decide to create a bar joke plugin, right? And all it does is it takes x and y and it returns x and y walk into a bar as kind of a joke template. And this calculator wouldn't do it, but my system is not calculator. My system is actually abstract and extensible, and it supports all kind of things, right? So you can write a plugin for this calculator system, and it will be able to do this, right? And now if we see our original plugin table, you'll see we have all kinds of operator. Somebody also decided to create average function, right? And this is dynamic, so it can be extended further and further. So I hope this kind of small calculator example builds up enough intuition which will help you understand Kibana's code base when I walk you through it, which is next. So far, do we have any questions? All right. So now with this intuition of what plugins are, let's kind of explore Kibana's code base and see how they are maintaining this huge system with plugins as the center concept. Okay. So I have cloned Kibana's repository. As I mentioned, it is open source. Anybody can look into the code base. Let me change the theme to white so that it's more visible. Okay, and I'll also go into presentation mode. All right. So is it visible to everyone? Okay. Okay. So let's first find the plugin table, right? The equivalent of plugin table in Kibana. So I kind of want you to look at this map of string and some interface, and just remember that this is similar to our plugin table. Okay, now let's first look into what the folder structure looks like. So you'll see it's a huge project. Lots of people are developing this, and it is truly an amazing system, I would say, in terms of code base. As I mentioned, it is TypeScript and React. So people who have worked with Node.js and stuff, they'll see familiar files. But the important folders are, I would say, source. So this is where all the source code lies, obviously. And then there is XPack. So XPack is like a set of plugins that they have developed, and you can use configuration files to kind of enable or disable them, but they enhance functionality of Kibana. In source, there is core, which is the core Kibana system. If I had to compare this with our calculator example, the core would be the calculator and register function basically, and the table provider. And you see, core system is really small. Everything else is just plugin. So most of the things that you interact with in Kibana are plugins. In fact, I showed you this button. It is also a plugin, and it is called UI action, right? Yeah, so this button on every panel is actually a plugin. It is called UI action. And we are going to look into that because it is simple to understand, and I can kind of guide you through the flow of how it works. Okay, so we talked about the UI action plugin, and we also just saw that I can kind of export this table to CSV file, right? And that functionality is actually a part of XPack. So this is where your CSV exports actually happen. As you can see, it's a simple class which implements action definition, and action definitions are things that are understood by this three option panel. And it has a simple execute method that can be called to do the Excel export. Pretty simple so far, right? And action definition is just an interface which says how your plugin should behave, right? So remember the first slide of our calculator system. We wanted to provide interfaces that are understood by both systems. So action definition is just that. And it says that your plugin should have execute method so that my system can execute it, or Kibana can execute it. Okay. Now in Kibana, so this is the file. It is present in XPack, and in Kibana, each plugin needs to have a kibana.json file. It kind of stores all the metadata for that plugin, and it needs a plugin.ts file where the plugin is actually registered. So in plugin.ts file, if I remember it correctly, there will be a setup method, right? And setup method is something that is called when the whole application is initialized, right? Is one of the lifecycle methods in Kibana, and that is where we'll probably find an object of our get CSV report panel action, right? So we are kind of tracking how the CSV export is happening. So in setup method, we are kind of creating a CSV export as an object and storing it into this const variable action. And if we go down here, we are telling that, UI actions, please register my plugin as with ID, this constant, context menu trigger, and it will have the action definition interface implemented object, which is action, right? So this is similar to our register method. Now let's try to follow where the method goes, right? So now we are in the plugins folder, and we are under UI actions. So as I mentioned, in Kibana, this options are all UI actions, part of UI actions. And here we have the add trigger action method, right, which is going to register our plugin. Let's see how it registers our plugin, right? So if it is just checking that in actions, do we have this ID already registered? If not, then register it, right? So let's go to register. And it is registering here. So actions.set, and guess what the actions are? They are our action registry, which I mentioned that, this is our plugin table. It's just a table with IDs. So these IDs, you can actually call them our operators in our calculator, and a function which is action internal, and it actually extends the action definition interface. So this is how a plugin is registered in Kibana, right? And as I mentioned, everything is actually a plugin. So this whole UI action part is also a plugin, and UI action is a plugin, and we built a plugin for that. So you kind of realize the value of scaffold or this abstraction, that we are kind of making plugins for a plugin that already exists. And it's kind of a really powerful architecture, in the sense that everything is decoupled. Different teams can continue working on different stuff without having conflicts or without having dependencies on each other, and it's returning as I mentioned, it's written in TypeScript and React. If you want to know more, so if you want to dig even deeper, like who initiates the action registry, then you'll have to go to the core functionality, where you'll kind of figure out how everything comes into place in this plugin module. But I leave that up to you to kind of figure it out. So, all right. So what's the moral here? What's the catch? What's the takeaway? Basically, Kibana is has a really good plugin-oriented architecture, and you can develop your own plugins. So I told you that Kibana didn't have a certain functionality that we needed. That functionality was actually exporting this as Excel instead of CSV, right? And for that, we kind of ended up designing our own plugin. And any plugin that you design go under the plugins folder at the top of the directory. So this is actually a repository at Incubyte, and we are doing the exact same thing, which is implement this interface action definition, and instead of downloading a CSV, it will just download a Excel file, and we'll just register it from here using the add trigger action method. So plugins kind of make your system really extensible. I hope everybody got a little bit out of everything that I explained. How are we deploying this? Really simple. We have a release configured on our repository, and we have just created a simple Docker file which grabs the base image of Kibana and installs our plugin, and then you have a Docker file ready with the Excel export functionality. So I'm also running the Kibana version on a Docker container, which is open here. Okay. So a really good system. I was impressed by it, and I kind of wanted to share my knowledge with everyone. So Kibana is actually an open source project. We love contributing to open source projects. If we are relying on those systems, then we want to give back to those systems, and it is a really good learning experience as well. So for me, for our team, we kind of ended up solving a good first issue in Elastic in Kibana, which kind of helped us understand how that repository functions, how the team functions, right, and how everything, every piece connects into each other. And then obviously we developed this Excel export plugin, and we have made it available open. So if anybody in future requires Excel export, they can kind of get the code from here. And we will continue making efforts to get this Excel export as a core functionality in Kibana in future. Yeah, that is all I wanted to talk about. Thank you, everyone. I hope everybody enjoyed the talk and learned something new. If we have any question or any discussion, we can go ahead for that. All right. If there are no questions, Arohi, if you would like to say any closing statements.
Yes, definitely. Thank you so much, Hardik, for doing this. I'm sure it was very, very informative. Guys, if you still have any questions later on about what Hardik mentioned right now, we can always reach out. We can get in touch with him. We'll be also uploading a video of today's talk on our YouTube. So folks who've joined in a bit later, you can go ahead and have a look at that as well. Apart from that, another reminder that Adam Thornhill is going to be our next expert talk on the 9th of June. He's a programmer who has degrees in engineering and psychology. He's the founder of CodeSense, if you guys would like to go and check that out, where he designs tools for software analysis. He's also the author of Software Design X-Rays and a whole lot of other books. So he's pretty much on the forefront in code analysis. So we're super excited to have him join us next month. So do register for that one. The event is already up on our meetup page.
All right. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, Hardik.
Thanks for joining in, guys. Thanks, Hardik, for doing this.
Thank you.
Everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.